blitz on the thousands of migrants already here, suspected of working illegally.
You've got one arrest being made here. We've never seen that line as high as it's been recently. Immigration is the number one issue.
The face has changed. And it's strange because foreign languages.
As we gaze from the historic Westminster Palace in London toward the British Parliament, what we see are merely the remnants of centuries of British imperial power and the rule of law. Yet today, those historic streets echo with more than just the British tongue. They are a mix of cultures from across the globe, extremist slogans, and instability built upon the loopholes of the law. The United Kingdom and the European continent today are facing not an external war, but rather the trap of ultra-liberal, yet practically ridiculous, human rights and refugee laws that they created themselves. The principles Europe signed in the 18th century for liberty, equality, and fraternity have now become an internal earthquake swallowing up their own native culture, security, and survival. What we are exploring here is the analytical evolution of the dark chain of events through which Europe fell from this paradise into the abyss, from history to the present day. The rooting of the human rights concept began with the Magna Carta signed in Britain in 1215. It laid the cornerstone for limiting the arbitrary power of the king and protecting the fundamental rights of the citizen. Later, it spread across Europe through the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen of the French Revolution in 1789. However, following the massive devastation of the Second World War in the 20th century, and particularly after the massacres of Nazi Germany, the nature of the law completely transformed with the United Nations issuing the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. Striving to escape the guilt complex of their past colonial crimes and to play the role of the global humanist, Europe opened these laws to the absolute extreme. Human rights laws served as a powerful weapon to deliver justice to those raising their voices against dictatorial regimes, subjugated populations, and victims of war crimes. They helped secure gender equality, labor rights, and ethnic equality. Unfortunately, without accurately understanding the boundaries of the law and by relaxing it to prioritize personal agendas over cultural and national security, it became a bomb, destabilizing countries themselves. By universally interpreting these laws, Europe began pushing the rights of its own native citizens into second place. Europe's descent into the abyss began with the collapse of colonialism following the Second World War. The relaxed visa and immigration policies implemented to summon laborers to Europe from the countries they once ruled completely weakened the rigidity of the law. In particular, with the removal of border controls among European Union countries through the Schengen Agreement in 1995, Europe's security collapsed entirely. Through this, an immigrant or criminal entering one European country illegally was granted the freedom to travel to any European nation, such as Germany, France, Italy, or Spain, without any strict border checks. The formulation of these common legal traps, leaving European leaders unable to protect their own borders in the face of human rights and refugee rights, was the true beginning that paved the way for anarchy and internal security breakdown across Europe. Following the Second World War, people arriving as laborers from India, Pakistan, China, and African countries completely transformed Europe's demographic composition. An immense proportion of valuable properties in major British cities, particularly in London, are now owned by businesspeople of Indian and Asian descent. Representatives of Indian and Muslim heritage began holding the highest positions within the parliaments and local government bodies of Britain and European countries. Former British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and London Mayor Sadiq Khan are prime examples of this. They gradually took this governance into their own hands. Through the emergence of Chinatowns and Pakistani and Indian commercial quarters in British cities, small subcontinental cultural zones sprouted right within Britain. The question that now arises for us is why the European public simply stood by until all of this escalated. Hundreds of thousands of people stream into Europe daily as refugees from conflict-ridden and economically fragile nations such as Afghanistan, Ukraine, Palestine, Morocco, Iran, Syria, and Somalia. Although they received legal refugee status on human rights grounds, sufficient job creation or cultural assimilation did not take place for them. Due to unemployment, a segment of these groups turned toward robberies, sexual assaults, burglaries, and international drug trafficking. The suburbs of Britain and France became breeding grounds for crime. In addition, extremists began exploiting European youth by misinterpreting Islamic doctrine. Exploiting Europe's open society and the vulnerabilities of its immigration policies, foreign intelligence agencies and terrorist networks operated clandestine networks within Europe. Extremists who entered Europe under the guise of refugees challenged the internal security and stability of European nations, turning Europe into a victim of its own policies. Yielding to pressure from international organizations and human rights bodies, European leaders fell prey to globalist agendas. Instead of prioritizing tax-paying native European citizens, they provided excessive welfare benefits to immigrants and refugees. This sparked profound anger and political instability among natives, with Brexit being one of the outcomes. Due to the rigid conditions within human rights laws, European nations have found themselves unable to forcibly deport even immigrants who get caught up in crimes or overstay their visas. Because they receive legal aid, they cannot be removed from the country even after years pass. As a result, the immigrant population has risen exponentially, placing Europeans today at severe risk of becoming a minority in their own homeland. Smuggling people into Europe across the Mediterranean Sea has today transformed into a multi-billion-dollar illegal mafia. Europe's weak laws and human rights-based compassion have been capitalized upon by human traffickers. They pack refugees into dangerous vessels and dispatch them to European shores, creating both a security threat and a humanitarian crisis for Europe. A striking example illustrating the extreme vulnerabilities of European Union border security and human rights policies is the migrant assault directed at Ceuta, Spain's North African enclave. The most dangerous and distinctive aspect of this situation is that, unlike typical refugees fleeing war, a major portion of the unauthorized invaders storming through are militant youths rather than women and children. As international media report, the size of this migrant wave is approximately over 60,000. Certain intelligence reports indicate that, under the guise of this, even guerrilla-style aggressors who have received organized military training are entering Europe. The Moroccan government strategically utilizes these migrants as a political weapon to exert pressure against the European Union. Due to the stringent and short-sighted human rights laws of the European Union, Spanish security forces have been unable to use strict force or firearms against these barbaric border breaches. Criticizing this crippled and weak border security policy of Spain, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has expressed a very firm stance. Because of this lax policy by Spain, the security of the entire European region has been thrown into a precarious state, with certain European Union members condemning such actions by Spain and creating intense discord within the Union. Ultimately, Spain's border security has completely collapsed, and due to the uncontrolled influx of migrants, domestic crime, violence, and social unrest within the country have surged to the absolute limit. The British culture, traditions, and lifestyle built over centuries are now being overridden under the heavy weight of multiculturalism. Instead of the identity of the British people, the religions, customs, and laws of other lands are taking precedence, causing British culture to gradually lose its dignity. Europe and England today are facing the harvest of the seeds they sowed themselves. Human rights should be a tool that secures human freedom, not a weapon that destroys a country's sovereignty and culture. If Europe, along with all the nations of the world, remains a prisoner to these ridiculous laws any longer, the continent that once taught the law to the world will ultimately go down in history as an empire that perished, caught in the trap of its own laws. Thank you for staying with us all the way to the end. We invite you to watch our previous videos as well. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and drop your comments with your thoughts. Until we meet another day with another meaningful video like this, ciao.